Well, if you've not seen this film, really, why are you watching it?
Mega
So,
spoilers.
Yeah.
Mega spoilers.
So if you've not seen the film, just fuck off, really.
My
Don't want
understanding
you
of the film,
I
will give my full summary, is
think...
Chris, who is a queer director and is, clearly our stand-in for Jane Stroburn, the director of the film, is given the opportunity to create a reboot of the slasher franchise Camp Miasma, which is old school slasher, kind of like Halloween, is where I think a lot of its things come from. She gets the opportunity to reboot it with an origin story of the killer of Camp Miasma called Little Death, and she goes to visit Billy, which is Gillian Anderson, who was the final girl of the original Camp Miasma film, to kind of study her and get her thoughts on remaking the franchise, and stuff from there.
Yeah. Do you think they called her Billy because in real life she's called Jilly? Like Gillian Anderson.
People call her Jilly.
In real life. And it was so natural for Jane Sherman to call her Jilly. So like, well, we'll just call you Billy.
You think people call her Jilly?
Yeah. I think probably that's true. Yeah, so, well, the reason that I chose this film, we both chose two films here, and this one was my choice is because we both liked some parts of the first film, probably quite a bit.
The first film, I saw the TV Glow.
Yeah, first film. Actually, also, it's not even her first film.
It's not even Jane Sherman's first film, it's second.
The first film that we've seen.
Yes. First film we saw, I saw the TV Glow.
We went into it liking, we liked some aspects of it, but I guess we didn't think that the world was necessarily not that the world wasn't well fleshed out enough for a very sensitive subject, especially with it being quite a morbid ending that we won't necessarily spoil. We didn't feel like it kind of necessarily went into the detail of this character's lives, and it felt like an archetype of someone who might go through this rather than being especially felt in some ways. And we thought that would be why it was interesting, because we had to examine our feelings of initial like against kind of maybe considering the wider implications of maybe using aesthetic shorthand with like very sensitive subjects of just to be general, the ideas of doomed existence and feeling like everything is just kind of I guess being trapped and maybe strokes at suicide. In the screenplay there's mention of sort of physical abuse, and I didn't feel it was kind of they say broad enough.
Well, also we're not talking about I saw the TV Glow, but it is true. We both watched it and enjoyed it, but didn't particularly think it was very good in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think the easy rebuttal against that is that it's a story about it's very personal to Jane Sherman about, gender and a trans experience that we can't relate to. But I would also say Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma is very much along those lines too, and I didn't feel that it was a sort of barrier of entry. Maybe people could say I saw the TV Glow. Well, maybe you're going to enjoy it more if you can relate in some ways to these experiences. I don't relate at all.
That's true.
And yet Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma I really enjoyed, I think it's just much better in a lot of ways.
I agree. I so absolutely agree. And weirdly, I guess, in some of the ways that are classic to a Hollywood studio system, like you're not getting to live and spend like moment to moment with these characters. It's interesting that actually in this film she's very critical of studio systems and things like that. From a place of irritation where it's like, I don't know, she seems like she's earned a little bit of trust with this, where she can have near enough all control, and we're liking her films a lot more. I don't know, maybe it to me affirms a little bit my thoughts on the TV Glow, where it's like, as someone just coming out of the gate, maybe she was still limited and held back a little bit.
An interview with Jane about I Saw the TV Glow, which obviously is an A24 production, and they were saying, amazing to be able to work with a studio like A24, and maybe if you're working with a studio for a story like that, it's probably one of the better ones to have. But you still have a certain sense of limitation and constriction, and you have to kind of sell your ideas, which are maybe quite personal and specific, in a way that works. And maybe had that experience with I Saw the TV Glow, and then with Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, a lot more, clearly a lot more freedom of expression, and not feeling like maybe you have to sell your ideas in a certain quite convoluted way a lot of the time.
It's so true. It's so true. I was even having a discussion about this with a friend where it was like, you know, if it was really dealing with, I guess, the nuances and the messiness of her life, would A24 still be able to sell pink opaque t-shirts? It's not getting to the gritty and the textural details.
It's so true. It probably feels like a dream come true. A24, maybe the wokest film studio, you could say. Of course, if you know...
Is this A24? By the way, I did assume this was A24.
It's not A24.
I thought it was, but I think that's just probably from the vibes. I don't know.
I don't believe it is. But
I can believe that it's not, because it feels a lot more uninhibited.
You know, and it's interesting because A24 maybe is... You'd have the idea that you could be a lot more freely expressed, but also films have to fit into like the canon of being an A24 film. You know?
It's true.
It has to be a certain kind of film to be part of the whole lineage of things. You know, all A24 films, in an interesting way, all sort of have the A24 stamp on them.
Yeah, and to that point, this film doesn't feel like an A24 film. I Saw the TV Globe does. You know, I just think actually, and it does show, I think she's being more free and more vulnerable and more honest in so many ways. I really did. Yeah, I did like it.
Well, I feel like we could very easily meander along forever talking about general things. The structure we're going to do is we have both picked a film to watch this week, and then we have both picked a piece of writing or short review or something on each film that we will read and talk about the film in the constraints of these reviews, you know.
It's so true.
So, you choose this one?
Before we get into that as well, I'm allowed to read out part of something I wrote, even if it's just some beats, to kind of give some words preceding what we're going to see first, especially about this film. Specifically responding to some of the feedback, before we're just kind of reading it all out, especially about the idea of it kind of just being the moral of the story is these characters indulge in fantasy. Like I saw a review that explicitly said, I think the moral of this film is kind of just let people enjoy things, I guess, which is like, you know, I understand why even you could interpret that from a film like this.
Completely wrong, you know. I don't
think
it's the
but
full
it's so
extent
flattening.
Of it.
It's so flattening of like the meaning and the depth to just say the moral of the story is no. I think actually she goes through really quite a lot to be able to reach a level of self-acceptance and to say let people enjoy things. Feels borderline a little bit like, you know, insulting, to be honest. I don't know. Well, like there's clearly a lot of sensitive subjects that are being brought through and like worked through in a way that's emblematic of probably Jane Byrne's own life. Not that that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to criticise the film, but still a little insensitive. Anyway, the things that I wanted to say, I guess, to dispute that and that I came to understand as a reference point for how to understand this film is in particular psychoanalysis, and specifically Lacan's psychoanalysis. In this film, Gillian Anderson mentions that Jane Byrne's character has another film called Je Suis.
Yeah, her breakthrough feature film before she's given the opportunity to reboot Camp Miasma is this film Just Once, which they never ever talk about beyond this little moment.
Beyond this like brief mention, it's so true. And Just Once is an idea of Lacan's, which means it is it describes the feeling of I'll actually just go through directly how the idea of Just Once would apply to Chris in this story. So Chris's character is one whose self-identity is built around being degraded to an extent. She is trodden on by her agent, her romantic partner, doesn't have any time for her. She's constantly belittled in her job. She's putting herself in relationships where, even if not consciously, she's asking herself to be trodden over again and again. Through her repression that we see and her conversations with Gillian Anderson, we get the feeling that she's really not happy with her life, yet still she's consciously kind of in these relationships and trying to seek validation from them, and not necessarily understanding why. This is what Shift wants. That is the nature of it. It is this longing that goes beyond desire or lust for a sensation that you can't quite understand. And it displays that nicely, but it goes a step further with that and suggests how you can break out of your own Shift wants for an audience. I think it sets like a reference point for how someone potentially could do this. So, for example, Gillian Anderson and her, they create a very kind of trusting relationship, or where they can create this fantasy where she can work through a lot of these everyday exchanges where she's kind of being flattened in her own way and change the outcome. An example of this is when she's going around and slaughtering all of those people. She slaughters her agent, she slaughters her partner, and her partner's boyfriend. Every person who is a flattening figure or represents that in her life is killed off. And then the final form of, I guess, freedom for her is where she is killed by a little death, quite brutally. It is the ultimate literalization of her being degraded, as women so commonly are in horror films, as the trope is established, right? But the difference is, unlike, in these horror films, the next day arrives and it was all safe and it was all play. And they created this way to work through these unconscious feelings and then come out of the other end of it and change the outcome. She is still safe. Then they go to the petrol station and they go, but he's still out there waiting, saying, but there's still things to work through. This isn't just comfortable, this isn't just safe. And that's a little, I guess, reference point to some of the very textual and academic lamps, because this is like one fragment of reading. There's so many interpretations I think you can have of this that can take analytical, academic approaches. It's very dense in that way, I think, and that was something I thought was interesting.
I think a lot of people, especially, notice in the film, Eros and Thanatos specifically, the love drive and the death drive, and how they work, in opposition to each other. But it's so true. You don't see actually many people mention the fact that, this film that is referenced in quite a big moment right at the start when we're actually getting into things is this term, what is it, jouissance?
Yeah,
which, goes beyond Eros and Thanatos into something else completely. And everyone else is maybe, picking up on those things, but actually Jane Schroburn is not so interested in that specifically, but a different kind of thing. It's all very silly, it's all very fun, all very fun. Even the final moment where she's getting stabbed by Little Death. I mean, Little Death himself is a lot of fun. Even his name is incredibly silly, because it's obviously supposed to be Little Death, which is petit mort, which is orgasm,
Also French. The fact that he's got a literal head, I saw someone reference this, is an idea of him, is the idea of her airing out physically her thoughts and her feelings. It's little things like that where it's like, it is like, Jane Schroburn is such an interesting kind of director where I've seen people maybe criticise that there's not many moments where the characters are left to breathe, which isn't something I necessarily agree with at all. I think there's a lot of quite tender and humane moments, but there is so much detail and things to unpack in maybe like a way that a Kubrick would be seen, or more relevantly, a Hitchcock possibly would be seen.
It is true.
Very controlled director in some ways.
It's interesting because because it's silly and fun and light-hearted doesn't mean at all that actually there isn't an incredible control and attention to detail.
So true.
The things that are fun. I think even the scenes that are maybe the most fun, silly, pushing into nonsense are the most ridiculously controlled. Like you have the montage the single shot tracking cam of Little Death when he comes out of the lake
So
and he's
interesting.
murdering everyone. It's nonsense and it's silly and it's fountains of blood everywhere. But it is also, you know, insanely specific in every single execution of it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting the way it's done because it's not especially evoking any emotion in that scene. It's like you're just seeing it happen. You're not like, damn, this is awesome. You're just like, oh, this is actually so interesting. It's clear that, you know, she's not trying to do like this is a release in some kind of way. It's meant to represent something more to the bigger picture of the film. Yeah. It's a part of it. Yeah,
it's so true. I think even, you know, starting the film starts with kind of this, the filming of the original Camp Miasma.
Yeah.
And there's these two teenagers that are hanging out near the water or whatever, and Little Death comes along and stabs them, and a huge, like, fountain of fake blood comes pouring out everywhere, and very much setting up from the very instance that it's not grounded in any sense of reality or closeness to these things.
It's so true.
Far away.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, should we go on to the actual review part?
Yes, well, we'll start with my review first that I have selected. This, I believe, was a 2-star review on the film that I will read out to you if you like. This is the whole review, I believe, the whole review.
Okay.
Make sex everything, make sex nothing. Tell us you desperately want to have sex with a woman, preferably older. Make identity everything, thereby losing it entirely. The human condition detrimentally filtered through internet culture and artificial environments. Tiresome meta, embarrassing self-insert, bad self-parody, awful slasher, pretty visuals. What are your thoughts on maybe?
Well, actually, it's so interesting because I almost actually feel the inverse. I didn't really actually like the visuals that much.
Whereas everyone
this is not me trying to
visuals,
be the mega contrarian,
it's beautiful. It is, I would say, quite meticulous hand-painted backgrounds.
It's true, but I wasn't necessarily struck by those parts. It's like she's able to do such interesting things while just focused. The best parts of the films are not those handcrafted visuals.
No.
They're when they're in a room and it's kind of cutting back and forth to Gillian Anderson and her, or those moments on those guys.
And I would even
Some
say,
of the other ambitious
I saw the TV Glow had way more of an emphasis on engaging visuals.
I agree,
way more of an emphasis on this, and not so much in this film. I think a lot of attention to it, and again, everyone's saying the beautiful background.
It's true.
But I
saw those and I thought this is done so people will call it beautiful. I didn't feel like it. I liked it for the purpose of emphasizing that it is incredibly filmic and none of this is real.
Exactly.
I liked it for that purpose, but I wasn't necessarily struck like aesthetically. Anyway, I've not really talked about the actual. What do you think about this review? I'm interested why you've chosen this one.
Because I do think that it maybe hits every single point that we've talked about ourselves with the film in maybe a very opposite way to the way we talk about it. You know, I actually think that Jane Schroban has, in Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, kind of transcended a lot of these things, you know?
Yeah.
I think especially make sex everything, make sex nothing is interesting. What do you think about that?
I just think it's like, what you're trying to do with this review is present Jane Schroban as creating a film that is pure projection, right? Is that not? Tell us desperately you want to have sex with a woman, preferably older. Make identity everything, thereby losing it entirely. I just think you completely missed the point of the film because it is so entirely, like we were saying, about stripping yourself of these identities and these terms. Yeah. Like there's a scene where Jane Schroban's stand-in. I agree. It's a very obvious self-insert. I can actually agree with that part, but like, why not? Who cares?
The thing is, I think it's even better in that there is no question about it.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so
with
true.
The photo of Hannah Eisenberg,
and
Chris,
it pans in,
and then it has Jane Schroban.
I remember even turning to you actually in the film, being like, "I wonder who this character's meant to stand up."
It is, it's set from the very go that like you are supposed to understand the film. With that knowledge, you know, it is baked into it. Who cares? Whatever.
Yeah, it's so true. And the idea of the like, this part is transphobic, shut up scene, which some people have cited as being, you know, bad, being like, well, why can't it discuss the complexities of trans subjects? It's not about that, it's about this character's identification with suffering, I think. And it's, you know, it's not wrong to want to explore those ideas, which are very distinct, but an over-identification to the point where it blocks out your ability to feel. It's about removing certain self-conceptualizations so that you can feel something more real. That's what the whole film is about.
And I think, you know, I saw the TV Glow was Jane Shroburn's film, really looking into how you identify with media specifically and integrate it into your life and analyze it with, you know, the pink opaque or whatever. And very, I think, adamantly, they've said that they want Teenage Sex and Death Camp Miasma to be expanding beyond that. You know, they don't want it to be like I saw the TV Glow at all. It wants to be completely different things. Why? Just because Jane Shrobun is a trans director, does every single film really have to get into the specifics of these things in these ways? I think they've already made their thoughts and feelings on it clear. Let's move on. It doesn't matter. We're doing something else this time that is still so wrapped up in those ideas and those experiences, but we're moving on a little bit. We're not.
It's clear that she doesn't necessarily want this to be identified. Maybe it wants it to be identified within a trans film canon, but not to just be printed and stuck with trans film, you know, in a big red marker across the poster, because Jane Shrobun has more parts of her identity and more things to say. And it's even detailed in the actual film where she's like, they don't actually want me for any reasons other than the fact that I'm a trans director and that can sell. There is self-awareness and like it delves into that, and it must be obviously really quite strange and a bit of a dissonance for her, you know, to be an entire person with all of these kind of feelings and suddenly kind of maybe being the face of trans filmmaking a bit now in the modern day.
Especially when you think of
it's
Jane
like actually another person
who's been in film an incredibly long time, really, you know. Jane Shrobun is like late 30s, I believe, been in filmmaking in general for quite a while.
I didn't know that, actually.
Worked on like short films for the Safdie brothers.
Really? What? I never knew that.
And then Jane Shrobun, obviously, their debut feature film was, I don't remember the title specifically, We're All Going to the World's Fair.
Yes, that's... Yeah,
and it was during We're All Going to the World's Fair that they realised that they were trans. It was during the making of that film, and they came out as trans in like 2019-ish, I believe. So you think, you know, you've been in film maybe your whole life as a certain kind of self-perceived identity, and then you make your debut feature film, and at the same time you come out as trans, and all of a sudden you are the current trans director, and your films are like ridiculously, you know, associated with by so many very vulnerable people who are all very much seeking community with each other, and you know, those really important pieces of art, and now you are sort of taking on that mantle just as you are coming into that identity for yourself.
Oh my god.
At the same time,
what insane,
you know, and then your next
load,
film, I Saw the TV Glow, is, you know, incredible in maybe doing those things for those people and whatever, but also how it must be so difficult, how much of your success and these ideas are only dependent on people wanting that from you, or identity from you first. So much of Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma is the stand-in Chris being like, this is nonsense, like they only want me because I'm queer, and they want, you know, this certain identity attached to their film. Difficult to reckon with, and also probably why trying to separate a little bit from being so specific in those ideas in a very academic way in this film. Of course it is about a trans experience because it's, you know, Jane Shrobun's film is so wrapped up in that, but we're not trying to very specifically seek out those ideas. So Gillian Anderson says, "Shut up, move on. We're not talking about that." I think fair enough.
Yeah, I think so. Should we go on to the next review?
Yeah, well, the next review is quite a long review.
Oh, is this the one I chose?
This is the one Jack chose. It's quite a long
I
one.
think it's really
It's
interesting.
in multiple stages, so we'll do it stage by stage.
We'll go for it step by step.
I'll read it out to you.
You really did choose quite a...
I chose a nice, short, and easy one.
I do like the
Millennial pee and poop at Camp Epic Bacon.
I do kind of like that.
I wouldn't say I even noticed so much that kind of
guys, I mean,
things in a
bisexual King
way.
4 is...
But we're meant to really laugh at those people.
Yeah, it's true.
We're meant to think these are the worst.
For me, the lines are a little blurred where the Camp Epic Bacon starts and stuff. But to be honest, it doesn't matter because the film is something about something much more beautiful than that. Anyway, a little bit still funny, you know. I get.
Well, it's the kind of thing we say when we don't like the film.
That's why I like it. That's why
I like it.
I don't agree, but spiritually I understand where you're coming from.
If I watched this and didn't like it, I'd say the same thing. I really do think you've just tapped into something fun now.
Well, I mean, for like the first quarter of this film, what I was thinking was this is like Deadpool for people who like Steven Universe, is what I was thinking. Steven's Universe.
I mean,
but guys, that's not fair. It's not.
We showed up and maybe we didn't expect to like it at all, and now here we are. We're number one defenders.
Yeah, it's so true. We're on the front lines.
I really didn't think I'd like it, and especially so much at the start. You know, the characters would mention a topic, and I'd be like, "Oh, great!" They go polyamory, or they go, "Okay, great, amazing! I'm excited to hear your take on that."
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm not sure. Yeah, that is true.
But it was actually so good, you know.
It's so true. It's so true.
Not what I was expecting a lot of the time.
Anyway, we'll do. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to?
I'll read it. I can read it from here. It'll be easier. Okay, Chris Hannah Einbinder. I've actually been saying her name wrong this whole time. I'm realizing now reading it. A transparent stand-in for director Jane Schroeder and themselves. Watch the DVD of the sloppy Camp Miasma sequel, and the film cuts to her frantically scribbling a single capitalized word, desire. How wonderfully ironic that a filmmaker so intent on spelling everything out for the audience should here quite literally spell it out. Desire is the latest entry in Schoenberg's lexicon of didactic faux profundity, no different from There Is Still Time repeated in TV Glow, nor the litany of one-liners here seemingly engineered to become Tumblr screen caps. Showrun cinema tells you precisely what to think, how to think, and when. You are told what is symbolically phallic and what is symbolically vaginal. You are told what metatext to situate the film amongst. You are also, most damningly, told what to feel.
Can I go up the bat first? Because I just disagree with this opening section so much. I think the purpose of her writing desire, like, yeah, I agree. That is, like, on the nose. But I don't think that the purpose is solely to cue an audience that this is a movie about desire. It is about her own self-detachment from desire. Like, she's approaching it from a concept.
Yeah.
It's like a distancing from something that is innate in quite a simple opening scene that establishes that she feels separate from her identity. It's to establish that in a true, guys, maybe a little bit of an obvious way, rather than to just say, this is a film about sex. I don't think it's...
Yeah, because the whole point is you see, like, very comically even overperformed sexuality in the sequel, and then you cut to her looking quite like... desire. Like, really pondering it in a very academic way, clearly not in any way actually connected to it.
It's
really thinking about it and then writing down desire. But
it captures her whole character,
yeah.
intellectualizing something that, as Gillian Anderson later quotes, the film isn't about being trans, it's all about, I can't remember, like...
flesh and fluid.
Yes, it's a good way to introduce a character, and I think that this is a little bit reductive.
Also, not to be whatever, but like, in the TV Globe, it is true, they were constantly saying there is still time. Do they ever talk about desire in this
No,
way?
does she ever like repeatedly go to that page in the notebook out and be like,
it moves on. It moves on. It's not.
While Gillian Anderson is fingering her, does she go? And then a light bulb appears.
If anything, I would say like I think the clear like repeated motto of this film is about you can turn it off if it gets too scary.
It's true.
It's clearly actually the there is still timeism of this
that
film.
Would actually, if you were trying to criticise this film, that would be the line to go to. I think in all ways this actually is a misfire.
Like Gillian Anderson be saying that all the time.
Yeah, so true.
They never say this again, really.
No. It is a misfire, I think. But I still think this actually is well written and understandable.
I think it's a very well written, good review. I
still don't think that this first paragraph holds up, to be honest, at all. So, yeah, well, anyway.
It is so true, and I think it's coming. I don't mean this whatever way, because you have no idea who has written this review, but it's coming from quite a scathing, internal or like pre-existing viewpoint. You know, talking about, you're going to become Tumblr screen caps. All these things. You have a set idea of these things as the kind of person James Sherburne is, the kind of film she's wanting to make, and going into it with all those things, you know, it's a Tumblr film. Why is it a Tumblr film? Because James Sherburne is a trans woman who exists in these communities.
I do kind of get what it's saying. I don't know. I mean, like, I think I Saw the TV Glow has some of those kind of like glamorized Tumblr. Glamorized emotional aesthetics. I do think it's a little bit about identification rather than like saying depth in the same ways that Tumblr can be. It's like the Pedro Acosta thing of the closed door where you can tell that a marketed film is an open door film. It invites you to identify with these characters, whereas a film like Ozu is a closed door film, or a film like this, even I would potentially argue, is a closed door film.
That's what
it doesn't give you like, it doesn't neatly like give you an archetype of what their character is so you can identify to it. It presents them as very,
But that's what I mean. I feel like it's unfair to say that about this film.
Yeah, it's true.
It's coming with your
I just think it's a
preconceived idea. Maybe I can understand that description of I Saw the TV.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it is intruding upon maybe your viewing of this film.
Yeah, I can see that.
I maintain that TV Glow
it's interesting.
Is one step away from being unbearably corny, but narrowly manages to escape through its viscerality. For all my reservations, and there are many, it retains a hypnotic quality and more intelligently sketches a link between similar ideas of dissociation. Just to butt in to say, I really don't think it does do that.
Yeah.
I really don't believe
I think its depiction of dissociation is bad. I think it's a bad depiction.
I don't think
it just makes an archetype out of her, and you never go into the depth of it. I totally disagree.
Yet the same major defect of that film returns here. The subtext and metatext is the text. I'm honestly unsure if Schoenbrunn has ever held a conversation that doesn't revolve around that cursed word, media. Their films exhibit an almost religious how do you say?
Zealotry
toward the image and the screen that I find rather objectionable. Both films ostensibly define identity through spectatorship itself and participation in fandom as a marker of selfhood. To Schoenbrunn, you are what you watch.
Guys, I just feel like you're so missing the point that it's criticizing
it's
this is literally everything that Gillian Anderson is like trying to deconstruct from her and be like, stop this over fixation, this distancing. You know what I mean?
It's true. It is so true. I think, and I can understand it. I think massive part of culture today is identity through spectatorship itself and participation in fandom, especially for young people, especially for young queer people and women, all these things. But I think actually, I really do disagree with it.
Yeah. Well, I think Something that people talk quite a bit about is, and maybe where this is touching on is how often Jane Sherburne uses pastiche, especially from David Lynch, and obviously from Texas Chainsaw Massacre in this, from Psycho, from Halloween, but it, it is very textual in those ways, and maybe to an extent, I think I do a little bit agree that how wrapped up it is in the culture of other films is maybe to some point a little bit limiting in the sign of someone that still a little bit needs to come into themselves, because one thing I was thinking about is there is a scene in this which is somewhat similar to a resurrection scene, the scene where she dies at the end and then obviously actually does come back, and it's very much coded into the lineage of all of these other films around it, whereas a film like Death, for example, has a resurrection scene in it that is insanely astounding and beautiful, and the whole film is just letting everything breathe, and then it hits like an actual truck, and that obviously is a difference between Jane Sherburne being like a really amazing director and but there are still scenes in this that I think transcend that. Like example you mentioned, which is the scene where she where it's the one shot take with like that song going on, where it's like, what is the tone here? This is actually so interesting what you're trying to evoke with this. That's totally unique. That's not pastiching anything. All the stuff with the guy under the lake isn't necessarily a reference to anything. There's there's scenes where it's so explicitly exploring their sexuality and their feelings of repression. You really think that's all like pastiche taken from another film? What other films are there that explore that with that specific context? What I actually so can't think off the top of my head. I don't feel like that saying that it's all in.
I do agree. I also think a big problem is that maybe our most well-versed genre isn't slasher films, and I actually do think that there is a lot of reference, and it's wrapped up in a lot of slasher film history that maybe we actually just don't pick up on. I think actually a lot of things are, the film is also trying to be kind of in conversation with that genre, and creating something new within it, and if it's possible, like all these things, and deconstructing typical conventions and ideas in these films, but continue, all these things. Even the whole point of it is remaking Camp Miasma, the original film. And Chris is always saying, well, I want to make something new. I don't want to make the same old whatever, but is doing so inadvertently by trying to recreate the same things with the final girl as even the same exact actress, and all the ideas in the original film, whatever. I just think maybe we don't even pick up on so many of the references and the ways that is happening in the film, because we don't really be watching slasher films. I wouldn't say that that's something I know huge amounts.
That's true, but would you not still say that she definitely lands on some things that, I mean, obviously I can't totally know, but like even beyond slasher films that feel totally unique to this film as a film, I think she lands on some vulnerability and ideas about repression. And again, I think some of the scenes, like that long shot scene, I don't know what, I really doubt that could be like a pastiche of anything. Like the long shot where it's going through, you know what I mean?
I do so agree.
All I'm trying to say is that I think it's a little bit reductive to say that she's totally, when actually she does really come into her own in some ways, I think.
It's okay. We'll move on to the next bit. Okay. Should it come as a surprise then that Camp Miasma is structurally identical to the register of franchise slot? I feel like there's about to be a jump scare right now, materially different to the evergreen Barb we used to derogate MCU dialogue. He's right behind me, isn't he? Why did you choose to live in the same place they filmed the original Camp Miasma any different to the widely panned researching spiders in the Amazon when my mother died remark from S.J. Clarkson's majestic interrogation of the feminine arachnid? I do not, unfortunately, find the mere sensation of recognition to be synonymous with wit. A film like Everything Everywhere similarly suffers from the twee chungousness displayed here, which is true. And no doubt,
Well, that is true.
a brigade of tender queers will once
Tender queers.
once again insist that anyone criticising the fresh new voice du jour simply lacks whimsy. What I mean to say here is that Camp Miasma is like seeing Easter eggs for an IP that doesn't actually exist, fan service for an imaginary fandom.
First of all, you're telling on yourself a bit, because what the fuck is tender queers? You're too cued in to some of this language to be like...
You too know the lingo.
Yeah.
This, we can remove this. But it reminded me of the other day. That was it last night when we were talking about tampons. And you go, oh, what about Diva Cup? How do you know about that? How do you ever know about that? How do you even know on that? Revealed. Well, strange you know
just
that.
Tapped in.
But it's the same thing. You're tapped in
No, I don't think it's the same thing. I don't want to be like...
I mean, it's the same thing. But you know what I mean, when you inadvertently kind of say something that is like revealing that you are more knowledgeable on something or weird.
Or integrated in something that you're trying to tell.
Yeah, it's so true.
Well, I just don't. I see what you mean, and I can understand why you could think this is a film like Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I just don't agree with this.
Yeah.
I think it's so much critique in there and self-awareness about it that Everything Everywhere All at Once doesn't have. Everything Everywhere is a self-aware film, but it's not self-aware about itself. It's just a postmodern film. It's just a Deadpoolism, you know. It's I just don't have that same vibe. And like again, it's I think kind of easily disputed. I feel like there's about to be a jump scare right now. Her saying that out loud, it affirms this idea that she is creating the same traumatic things from her childhood, you know, that have evoked in her. She is willingly bringing herself into these unsure, dangerous situations.
She's
kind of perversely getting into it,
already. No, it's
what
not,
Marvel film is doing
it's
that?
Not
what Marvel film is like?
Real thing to say.
Yeah.
She's saying it because she kind of be loving.
She's liking, it's so true.
She's walking around this room and no one's here, and it's getting all creepy, and she loves it. She loves it in some way, and she's creating that sort of fiction for herself, saying that, making it, story-like and similar to her fantasy in these ways. It is so true.
It's something that happens throughout, and Gillian Anderson actually becomes like an all-knowing figure who's like, I know that you're doing this and that you're depriving pleasure from this. It's why she pretends she's talking to the night and then makes her go through it. She knows that it's like, it's really quite perverse.
Even,
and it's...
right after this line, I feel like there's about to be a jump scare right now. Gillian Anderson comes out and is... I should sit forward a minute.
Oh, yeah.
And is like, I just wanted to scare you a little.
Yeah.
And it's like setting up the whole thing right from the start.
It's so true. It's establishing these motifs.
It's a silly line. It is silly. It's just joking. But it's not, because then Gillian Anderson does come out and is clearly, playing already. She's already trying to be playful and push limits and all these things.
It's so true. Earlier, guys, I said I thought this was a good review. I think it's a well-written review. That is just, I don't know, I so think, for all of the detail you've gone into this, I really feel like you've missed some things that are right kind of there. Yeah. I don't know.
It's so true. Even I think back to, in the very start of this review, it said something that, one of the worst things about the film was it tells you how to feel about the film itself, which is so not the experience I had of it. Where I actually felt like it was really quite differing reactions from everyone around us as we were in the cinema watching it for various different things.
So true.
It felt like there was not really one consensus reaction to so many of the scenes. A lot of people laughing, but I wasn't laughing. A lot of other people aren't laughing. Some people, it's really quite mixed bag. I don't think that anyone was really, following oh well, this is clearly the reaction to this scene, this is clearly the reaction to this scene. It was really quite different.
I think so, and I think that's I so agree, because I remember one scene you said that everyone laughed at that you found moving is after she kind of been able to see outside of herself a little bit. She comes through and she's a little bit stripped down from her typical nerdy stereotype,
and
she's topless, and she looks like,
and
you know,
she's trying to be sexy but in a kind of stilted way, but she is
like a really quite moving scene actually.
Laugh at it, and it is funny. I understand, but I didn't find it particularly.
Also, a really moving scene,
really
genuinely.
Moving.
Yeah,
it's really moving, but it is also funny.
It's
what
so
is your
true.
response to that? I suppose it depends how it makes you as an individual feel. Is the whole point. Is it's not telling you how to feel about it. I can understand why people laugh at it, because maybe they feel a bit awkward in that.
Yeah.
You know, they feel a bit strange about that. They feel whatever, and the reaction is, well, this is funny. But for me, I thought it was really interesting and quite, I don't know, compelling. I didn't laugh at it. So it's not at all
I
James Sherburn telling you how to feel about each scene at all.
Yeah.
Oh, just to break the fourth wall for a second, I thought I was done with ranting about how much I detest Sharon Brun's writing, but I am compelled to continue. Their naming is likewise awful. Remember how TV Glow's campus was called Void High School? Chintzy, I don't know that word either. Enough on its own, and even worse when capitalised to acronomically spell VHS.
I do agree that's kind of cringe.
Yeah, well, I thought I saw TV Glow was kind of cringe if you do the ways guys anyway.
Yeah.
So, fine. When you talk about I saw TV Glow, I'm kind of we're on the same team.
Yeah, it's true, it's true.
The offender here is a miasma itself. Do you know what miasma means?
Doesn't it mean like it's either maybe a disease or a dull, weird
It used to be quite officially bad air.
Bad air.
Bad air is how people thought you got sick. Was bad air in the air making you poorly. It was selected with the confidence that audiences will dutifully Google its definition before congratulating themselves on having discovered hidden meaning. It's like Bond girl nomenclature. Here's some more lines just because it pissed me off so much. I'm going to a poetry reading for the bisexual king I've been seeing. Reddit is going to prematurely ejaculate in their tight little jeans.
This is where it does with me over a bit, because I don't know where, again, the lines are blurred and cheese.
I will say, the characters who say these lines
are all the worst.
Are all
later
murdered, you know, in quite a fantastical way.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's really supposed to be taken so seriously. But for all of Schoenbrun's obsession with media, it is curious that their presentation of spectatorship is rather insular. Chris's artistic practice, we are told, explores the intersection of queerness and cultural depictions of monstrosity, and we arrive at that familiar proposition that queer audiences have the capacity to reclaim or identify with problematic texts. But that is it. Schoenbrun's films cannot and do not move beyond identification. At least with TV Glow, it seems like, and I hate using this term to describe art, a net positive insofar as being a cultural object that many trans people have been profoundly affected by. I don't think Camp Miasma possesses the same potential. The fantasy here is never allowed to become unstable or dangerous because we are always assured that it's all just play. I really do disagree.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think I'm realising now I wanted to relay that thing at the start is to show, in terms of net positives, this is doing a lot to try and help people. If there are people who are looking, if there are people who become fixated on this film, there's a lot you can go into that could potentially help someone.
So I think. I think I saw the TV Glow it's true, very, describing it as a good thing, that it's a cultural object that many trans people can be profoundly affected by. Lovely, certainly. Camp Miasma, I think the actual place it's coming from is it's, Jane Sherburne's becoming more comfortable or sexual awakening after coming out as trans.
Yeah, I think it's wrong. It's not about identification. If you really think that the most this film goes into interesting territory is we have the right to reclaim or identify with problematic text, I don't think that is it. And I think probably we have laid out all the reasons that we don't, think that is the case.
Yeah, we can move on to the next bit. In a sex scene involving Ironbinder, still in Hacks mode, which is the show that Hannah Ironbinder is most famous for.
That's true.
And Gillian Anderson doing what seems to be a Lindsey Graham voice, Chris speaks about imagining oneself as a hypersexualized victim endemic to 80s slashers. To crudely appropriate Mulvey, Laura Mulvey, you know who this is, wrote in 1970s quite what's what I'm thinking of, influential essay on film on the male gaze versus the female gaze, and you will of course hear people talking about the male gaze now today, and it comes from this essay or series of essays in 1970s from Laura Mulvey. But to crudely appropriate Mulvey, she desires to become a victim of the gaze too. I shall leave it for someone else to unpack the implications.
Become a victim of the gaze.
The implications of voyeurism and transness here, considering the credited director of Miasma's film within a film is literally Ray Blanchard, LOL. Which again, I think, just we are not well versed in slashers to even pick that up. But the fantasy is domesticated before it can even be uncomfortable, as Gillian reminds Chris and asks if it gets too real, you can always turn it off. Camp Miasma consequently cannot decide whether it wishes to revel in, challenge, or condemn the pleasures of spectatorship when they are tangled with violence. I suspect that it reproduces much of the misogynistic imagery it purports to repudiate, but coats it with hecking doggoisms.
Again, self-report, guys. You're being a little bit cringe, not even inciting. But I think we just keep on going because I think it's going to reach a point and we'll just disagree with it.
This is a film so intent on controlling its own interpretations that it precludes genuine interpretation altogether. The ultimate spectator here is not the audience, but Schoenberg themselves. Auto-cannibalistic and Ouroboros cinema. You're ready for spoon-feeding lessons? Emerald Fennell gulped. Adam McKay nodded. The Daniels breathed nervously. Yes, Joan Schoenberg, they said in unison.
Again, funny bit really, but I just...
You can't sandwich your kind of poo review between two funny and you'd be like, well, kind of, I like that.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
true.
funny
That's
it's
true.
in, I got me.
Yeah, well, yeah, I so disagree, guys. You want to go to the last slide, if that's okay?
This one?
Yeah. Again, it's crudely appropriate movie. She decides to be a victim of the gaze, but the fancy is domesticated for it. She's saying that like the murdering and the incitement of certain imagery recreates the same misogyny. I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest, because the violence in this film is detached from pleasure in a differing way to slashers are. It is insanely, like, unbelievably, comically unrealistic. It is so filmic, it is so intrinsically filmic that, it is taking an audience out and being like, this is obviously, not associated with real violence. So if you're coming at it from that angle, it is so cartoonish, not in a way to get thrills out of this subject, but to a difference, to, draw a clear line, the same reason that all of the landscape is fabricated and constructed. I just think, like, every main point, even really, that this review kind of tries to land, actually, is just not necessarily grasping, I think, some of the more intricate parts of the film.
I agree. I think probably we're going to come on to the male gaze with our next film that we watched.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very big TikTokification to talk about the male gaze versus the female gaze. I think this review kind of just puts itself only one little step above those TikToks by referencing where that term comes from, Laura Mulvey. Just because you can reference who came up with this idea doesn't mean you understand it at all. It was very much about Laura Mulvey's essay is talking about male directors and, you know, the way they give women versus men, you know, interiority and the actual use of the camera itself in these ways, how the male gaze, we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, very soon. It's not specifically about sexualization from men in the women in their films. It goes so much more beyond that into actually, you know, women being dehumanized or objectified, again, not purely in a sexual way, just as like a tool, as a process to go through, you know. I just, you know, it's taking something and not quite applying it correctly. Does Chris want to be a victim of Laura Mulvey's male gaze? No. She wants to be sexualized, and, you know, she wants to be sexualized and degraded. And you can say that this comes from these films that she watched when she was younger. She watched these slasher films and saw these women that she wants to be later in life. But she doesn't want to be like that purely because of this film. You know, this film has implanted a physical idea of what that looks like, but her actual desire to be like those women comes from something much deeper than that, much more psycho, you know, analytical, much more subconscious. It is just that the closest she has ever come to that is seeing that these slasher films of the women being hunted down in this beautiful way, and she attaches to that idea, but her actual primal inside want to be sexualized in these ways wasn't created by the films. It is just the film gives you the first experience of it.
It is ridiculous.
So it is just nonsense. She doesn't want to have
movies
the male gaze because it's
wrong.
not associated with that. It is something
way deeper. Misinformed.
It's way deeper than that.
Like, actually, another psychoanalytical side of this is that it details, you know, not as explicitly, but I think it very much details Carl Jung's ideas of archetypes, active imagination, so true, and I think archetypes especially, particularly the idea that is emphasized maybe a couple of times, which is that Little Death is real and he has existed long before the films. And that is the idea that what is in the film isn't obviously necessarily Little Death, but an accumulation of certain feelings and an archetype that has existed long before these films, and that is what she's evoking. And when it is the films that are being made, it is the idea of Little Death is the one making them. It is these archetypes going into people and being lived out through these films is kind of that idea.
And if we was maybe to be a bit more clear about it, Carl Jung's idea of archetypes are these, you know, ideas in the, if you like, collective unconsciousness of people, that there exists these archetypes in all stories, all everything that are coming from sort of some deep, unknowable place in the human psyche, coming out in these stories again and again and again, and you have certain archetypes within yourself, and it is so true. It is, I think, very clearly supposed to be, maybe not even that Jane Schrober has specifically said, I'm going to make a film that is about these two characters, you know, following, you know, Jungian analysts of whatever.
No. I mean, Lacan and Jung cross over quite a bit anyway, in terms of those ideas of, you know, something existing beyond language and things like that. So it to me is kind of still woven in, and she knows Lacan and references him. I'll be so, you know, she's definitely cued into that.
It's so good, anyway. You know, because you have the scene where young Chris watches Camp Miasma for the first time, and she has some sort of awakening, and later she describes it as her, you know, queer awakening. But it clearly is much more than that.
Yeah, it's so true.
It is where she really associates all sorts of ideas with that. But the question is, obviously, Little Death existed beyond, before all of this, and is, you know, choosing and making things happen. In an actual way, why did little Chris really so associate with this film? It wasn't that the film itself, that Camp Miasma, the director of Camp Miasma, is so intensely powerful that he can create this image that really imposes upon you. It is that the archetypes that are coming through in Camp Miasma in the original one, that it's somehow really cued into the original only, awakens something in you because it is your first experience, maybe
being exposed to this archetype,
to this feeling that exists within you too, but you can't really quite grasp or know, you know. And it's why all the other Camp Miasma films are too far, because the only one that was actually really doing something was this first one that is expressing something beyond itself, even in this silly way. It's not at all that these slasher films are super effective in these ways. It's just that they are conveying some deep archetype of humanity that you resonate with and you associate with, because you don't really get it anywhere else.
It's so true, and I just think it shows that on so many levels this review is actually just really ill-informed. It is ill-informed. Like, if you're allowed to call, Jane Sherburne's film shit, basically, then we're also allowed to say part of your reviews are a bit shit. You, in the same sentiment, have kind of got the idea of the gays as registered from Mulvey wrong. Maybe you have missed the, I will say, multiple attempts to establish that Sherburne is clearly laying out that these ideas exist beyond the film, and it's not from the film. It is existing. She so explicitly says in that Zoom call and another time, he has existed long before these films.
Yeah. He makes the films.
Yeah.
Is what they says again.
It's just, I just think it's a little bit, misinformed. And if you're going to gun for a film this hard, then come on, maybe I don't know, reevaluate things a little bit. I don't know.
It's true.
That feels maybe a little bit cruel.
I think understanding it's not. You're getting maybe part of the way there that Chris is imagining oneself as a hypersexualized victim endemic to 80s slashers. Certainly is the case, but it is because of these things that go much deeper and much more into, Chris's actual personhood. It's not just that these slasher films create a certain idea that, when you watch them and you're young and now you're all grown up, you think of things that way. Not the case. It's just often your first experience of finding something that is actually within you already, and you just have only just uncovered in this way.
That's so true.
Well, what would you rate Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma out of 5 then?
I gave it 3.5 on Letterboxd and I liked it.
3.5 and a half.
And a half.
3.5 and a half. Yeah, I think I do agree. I think but I think actually we've been mega positive about it. So why only 3.5 specifically? It's
just the thing that probably I said about a film I've forgotten the name for it already. I'm sorry, Odette, by Garfield O'Drea, which is a film that maybe gives you a little bit more space to breathe and be hit by something a little bit more real. And I was affected by films affected emotionally in this way, especially I'll say while watching it. But does it kind of stick with me in the same way a film like Odette does? No, but I will actually mull over it for a while and actually think it's incredibly interesting. But I can actually maybe sympathise with the take that maybe it's a little bit too textual to breathe a little bit. And some of the best scenes are the one where maybe she doesn't feel the need to exist within this body of images. How about you?
Well, it's true. There is a lot going on in the film, which is, on the one hand, very good and interesting and enjoyable, but on the other hand, so much going on at times that maybe an actual very core part of it gets a bit watered down. But I understand immense pressure on Jane Sherburne that you can't possibly understand.
It's true.
It is insane mantle that you suddenly now have and have to have the responsibility to do a good job with, not just for yourself but for so many people. That of course maybe you feel like your film has to serve something, grander in some way. It has to serve a purpose in some grander way. And so the film has to achieve all these things and do all these things and be in conversation all these ways and be so grand and big. Because, of course, you feel that way, you know? Because you've got, you know, you're having to represent such a vulnerable group of people, you know, with your film, with your actual whole career. Of course, that's where it comes from. I hope Jane Sherman can. I don't completely think not care about the responsibility you have having that mantle, but maybe let go of it a little bit.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Detach from it.
I do only think that Jane Sherman is maybe going to get better.
I do agree.
I do
agree. Only going to get better, I hope.
What would you rate it?
I think 3.5 I agree with. I do feel similarly to it. Maybe even 4. I think I would maybe say 4 star out of 5.5.
Amazing. And a heart and a love heart.